If you're renting in Los Angeles right now, you've probably felt it. That sinking feeling when you open your lease renewal letter, that knot in your stomach when you're scrolling through rental listings and everything seems impossibly expensive. You're not alone. And what's happening in the LA rental market in 2026 isn't just affecting a few neighborhoods. It's reshaping the entire landscape of how Angelinos live, work, and survive in this city. And here's the thing that nobody's really talking about. This isn't just another cycle. This is something fundamentally different. If you've been enjoying the insights here and want to stay updated on everything happening in the LA housing market, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on the critical information that could save you thousands of dollars this year. Today, we're diving deep into what's actually happening to renters across Los Angeles, from downtown to the valley, from Venice to Pasadena. We're going to break down the numbers that matter, explore the forces driving these changes, and give you the real story behind the statistics. Let's start with where we are right now. As of early 2026, the Los Angeles rental market is in a state of tension that would make even the most optimistic housing analysts nervous. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles proper has crossed the $2,500 threshold. Think about that for a moment. That's not for a luxury high-rise in Century City or a beachfront property in Santa Monica. That's the median, which means half of all one-bedroom apartments are renting for more than that amount. Two-bedroom apartments are now averaging between $3,200 and $3,600 per month, depending on which neighborhood you're looking at. We're talking about rental prices that just 5 years ago would have gotten you a pretty nice mortgage payment on a starter home in many parts of the country. The San Fernando Valley, once considered the affordable alternative to West Side living, has seen some of the most dramatic increases. North Hollywood, which artists and young professionals flock to as an affordable creative hub, has experienced rent increases of 18 to 22% over the past 18 months alone. A modest two-bedroom apartment in Sherman Oaks that was renting for $2,800 in late 2024 is now commanding $3,400 to $3,600. The West Side tells a similar story with even higher stakes. Santa Monica, Venice, and Culver City have become nearly impossible for anyone not working in tech, entertainment at the executive level, or finance. We're seeing one-bedroom apartments in Venice, blocks from the beach, listed at $3,800 to $4,200. What's fascinating and, frankly, alarming is the disconnect between these rising rents and actual demand signals. Vacancy rates across Los Angeles County have been creeping upward, currently sitting at around 5.2 to 5.7%. That's actually higher than the 3 to 4% we saw during the peak pandemic years. So here's the question. If vacancy rates are increasing, meaning more units are sitting empty, why aren't rents coming down? It's basic economics, right? More supply, less demand, prices should decrease. But that's not what's happening. And that discrepancy is one of the most important stories in the LA rental market right now. To understand why rents keep climbing despite increasing vacancies, we need to look at the forces reshaping the LA rental landscape. First, there's the institutional investment phenomenon. Over the past decade, but accelerating dramatically since 2020, large investment firms and real estate investment trusts have been buying up apartment buildings across Los Angeles at an unprecedented rate. These institutional landlords operate on a completely different model than the mom-and-pop landlords who used to dominate the LA rental market. Traditional landlords typically want to keep their apartments rented because an empty unit costs them money every month. But institutional investors are playing a longer, more complex game. They're backed by investment capital that demands specific returns. They've got analysts running algorithms that tell them it's better to keep a unit empty at a higher listing price for 3 or 4 months than to rent it out at a lower rate that might set a precedent for the building. This is what market analysts call artificial scarcity. The units exist, they're sitting there, empty, with the lights off, but they're not available at prices that reflect actual supply and demand dynamics. They're priced based on investment models that have nothing to do with whether a teacher or a nurse or a restaurant manager can afford them. Then there's the construction and zoning reality. Despite all the talk about building more housing in Los Angeles, the actual production of new rental units hasn't kept pace with either population growth or the loss of older, affordable units. Buildings that used to house working-class families are being demolished or renovated into luxury units. Rent-controlled apartments, when they turn over, are often renovated and brought to market at rates that are double or triple the previous rent. Drive around and you'll see cranes dotting the skyline. But here's what most people don't realize. The majority of new construction is targeted at the luxury market. Developers aren't building affordable housing because without significant subsidies, the math doesn't work. The cost of land in Los Angeles, combined with construction costs, labor, permits, and approval timelines, means developers need to charge premium rents just to make their projects viable. There's also the remote work recalibration. When the pandemic first hit, there was talk about people leaving expensive cities like LA. Some did leave, but what we're seeing now in 2026 is more complex. Many have come back or new people have arrived because, even with remote work, there's tremendous value in being in Los Angeles for networking, culture, career advancement, and lifestyle. Remote work has changed how people think about housing. Some people who used to live in tiny apartments because they needed to be close to work now want more space since they're working from home part of the week. This has increased demand for larger units and neighborhoods with better quality of life, putting pressure on exactly the types of units that used to be more affordable.
Now let's talk about what all of this means for actual people living in Los Angeles. Financial advisors have long recommended spending no more than 30% of your gross income on housing. In Los Angeles in 2026, that guideline has become almost laughable. To afford a median one-bedroom apartment at $2,500 a month without exceeding that 30% threshold, you'd need to earn $100,000 a year. The median household income in Los Angeles County is around $75,000. Do you see the problem? For a huge swath of LA residents, affordable housing according to traditional standards simply doesn't exist. People are spending 40, 50, even 60% of their income on rent. And when housing takes up that much of your budget, everything else suffers. Savings disappear, retirement contributions stop, emergency funds never materialize. The squeeze is particularly acute for middle-income workers, the people we depend on to make the city function. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, restaurant workers, retail employees. These folks are being priced out of the communities they serve. I spoke with a teacher recently who's been working in LAUSD for 8 years. She's been living in a rent-controlled apartment in Koreatown, paying $1,800 for a one-bedroom. She just received notice that her building was sold. The new owners are planning renovations, which means her rent control protections will likely disappear. Comparable apartments in the area are now listed at $2,800 to $3,200. That's an increase of $1,000 to $1,500 a month. Even with a roommate, she might have to leave Los Angeles entirely or face a 90-minute commute each way. Multiply that story by tens of thousands, and you start to see the cascading effects. Longer commutes mean more traffic, more pollution, more time away from family. It means teachers who are exhausted before they even get to the classroom. It means the fabric of community starts to fray because people can't afford to live in the neighborhoods where they've built their lives. And then there's the invisible population, people who are already on the edge and have now fallen off. An increasing percentage of people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles County are not struggling with addiction or severe mental illness. They're working people who simply couldn't keep up with rising rents. They're families who missed 1 month of rent and found themselves in an eviction spiral they couldn't escape. They're seniors on fixed incomes who got priced out of apartments they'd lived in for decades.
So what's being done about all this? Los Angeles has tried several policy approaches with mixed results. Rent control has been a flashpoint at LA housing politics for decades. The city has had some form of rent control since the 1970s, covering buildings built before October 1978. The Rent Stabilization Ordinance limits annual rent increases, currently tied to the Consumer Price Index with a cap. For tenants in rent-controlled units, this protection has been invaluable. But rent control has significant limitations. It only applies to older buildings. When a rent-controlled unit turns over, landlords can raise the rent to market rate, creating huge incentives to push out long-term tenants. And economists point out that rent control can reduce overall housing supply by making it less profitable for developers to build. The city has also implemented stronger tenant protections. Just cause eviction protections mean landlords can't simply kick out tenants without a legitimate reason. Relocation assistance requirements mean landlords who want to demolish buildings or do major renovations must pay relocation fees. On the production side, Los Angeles has tried to incentivize more housing construction. The Transit-Oriented Communities program offers density bonuses to developers who include affordable units. The idea is simple. Let developers build bigger buildings if they set aside units at below-market rates. In practice, the results have been underwhelming. The affordable units created often aren't affordable enough for truly low-income residents. The state of California has also gotten involved. Recent legislation has made it easier to build accessory dwelling units. There's been a push to streamline housing approvals and override local zoning restrictions in certain circumstances. These are meaningful reforms, but they're working against decades of underproduction. What becomes clear is that there's no silver bullet. Rent control helps current tenants, but doesn't solve the underlying supply problem. Building more housing takes years and faces political opposition. We need all of these approaches and more. But we also need to be realistic about how long policy changes take to translate into relief for renters struggling right now. So what should renters in Los Angeles expect over the next year to 18 months? Let me give you my honest assessment based on current trends and available data. First, don't expect dramatic relief in rental prices anytime soon. The forces pushing rents upward, institutional investment, construction costs, limited supply, are not going anywhere. We might see some moderation in rent growth, particularly if vacancy rates continue to increase, but significant decreases in absolute rent levels are unlikely. What we're more likely to see is continued bifurcation in the market. The luxury end will remain strong because high earners will always pay premium prices for premium locations. The truly affordable end, subsidized housing, will remain in desperately short supply, with long waiting lists. It's the middle market where the strain will be most acute. Geographic patterns will continue to evolve. As West Side neighborhoods become increasingly unaffordable, we'll see continued pressure on traditionally more affordable areas. Neighborhoods in South LA and the eastern San Fernando Valley will see more interest and, consequently, rising rents. This pattern of gentrification and displacement will continue across the city. We're also likely to see more creative housing arrangements, more roommates among people who would prefer to live alone, more adults living with parents longer, more people doubling or tripling up in units designed for smaller households. These adjustments help individuals cope, but they also mask the severity of the crisis. One factor that could change things is the broader economy. If we see a significant economic downturn or tech industry layoffs, that could reduce demand and force rent reductions. But that's not exactly a solution anyone should hope for, because the economic pain would be widespread. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The Los Angeles rental market in 2026 is not just expensive, it's structurally broken in ways that threaten the social and economic fabric of the city. When teachers and nurses and firefighters can't afford to live in the communities they serve, when working families are one rent increase away from homelessness, we have a crisis that goes beyond housing. But this isn't inevitable. Housing policy is just that, policy. It's a set of choices we make collectively. Other cities have faced similar crises and implemented solutions. Los Angeles can solve this, but it requires political will and public pressure. We need massive investment in affordable housing production. We need zoning reform that allows more housing in more places. We need to limit the financialization of housing. We need tenant protections that actually keep people housed. And we need all of this at a scale that matches the urgency of the crisis. For renters navigating this market right now, my advice is this: know your rights. If you're in a rent-controlled unit, understand your protections. Document everything in your relationship with your landlord. Join a tenant union if there's one in your building or neighborhood. There's power in collective action. Be strategic about your housing search. Look at neighborhoods you might not have considered before. Consider roommates or alternative arrangements if they work for your situation. Build an emergency fund if you possibly can, because housing instability can happen fast. And most importantly, stay informed and engaged. Vote in local elections where housing policy is decided. Contact your city council member and state representatives. Show up to community meetings. The decisions being made right now about zoning, development, and tenant protections will shape Los Angeles for decades to come. The rental market in LA feels overwhelming because it is overwhelming. But remember, you're not alone in this struggle. Millions of Angelinos are facing the same challenges. That shared experience is the foundation for change if we choose to build on it. This is a defining moment for Los Angeles. The city we become depends on the choices we make about housing in the next few years. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below and let me know your experience in the LA rental market. Are you struggling with rising rents? Have you had to move? What changes do you think would actually help? Let's keep this conversation going, because that's how we turn awareness into action.